Okay, good evening. It's Monday, August 3rd, 7 p.m. This is the August meeting of the Narberth Planning Commission. I am Adam Crom, the chair, and I will take quick attendance. Ralph? Here. Jennifer? Here. Brian? Is absent. Todd? Is absent. Aaron? Here. Heidi is absent. Our alternate, David Greenberg, was absent. So we have 4 out of 7 members present. So we do have a quorum, so we'll proceed with our business. We have 6 items on the agenda this evening. First is announcement and updates, followed by review of the minutes from the July meeting. Item 3, the main item of business, one of the 2 is Planning Commission's review and or recommendation of the ordinance 1073, which is a zoning amendment that would add fitness and indoor recreation and studio uses to the zoning code and would permit them in downtown, in the downtown district of 5A, as well as a change to the zoning code to have the same number of parking spaces required for both restaurants and retail. They're very similar today, but there's a slight difference. So standardizing that. So we can review what Borough Council has sent to us for discussion and give our input on that. After that is a presentation on stacked townhouses that our staff planners will give us. That's again at the request of Borough Council's asked the Planning Commission to provide analysis of allowing stacked townhomes in the borough, which is basically a townhouse with 2 units on top and bottom. Then we have item 5 is public comment. If anyone wants to comment on topics for the Planning Commission, and then we will adjourn for the evening after that. Okay. The staff planner have any updates this month?
The only update I really have, it's also, I encourage you all to go through the zoning codification one more time. Extra sets of eyes definitely help. I've had some colleagues take a look and, they can find other things here and there. Overall, it's in relatively good shape, but yeah, I appreciate any feedback. There is a hearing to review public zoning codification and potentially adopt it August 20th. In between now and then, I would be just adding, doing a couple more reviews myself, and then basically placing where all of the pictures are going to go. So I haven't done that yet. But yeah, welcome any of your feedback on that. That's the update.
Where is the draft file to look at again?
That's a good question. So, Emily, has the file been shared?
Yeah, we have it on the website on the zoning ordinance page where we have the timeline of when council will consider adoption.
Thanks.
Okay. One other thing then, just as information, it's not on the agenda, but the development for the Citizens Bank building has a minor change that they're making to the design, which is just to add to subdivide one of the apartments into 2 apartments. So there would be 5 apartments instead of 4. So it's not considered to be material change, so those will come back to the planning commission. But we have the letter if anyone's interested in that. Okay, I don't think there's any other updates this month. So we can go into item number 2, which is the review of the July minutes. Have any comments on the meeting minutes?
I mean, internally, we talked about adding some more detail about commentary around the development that was proposed last session. And some of that has already been shared with through some emails, but maybe you want to provide the detail.
Yeah, so I mean, the minutes that were prepared really just mentioned that we reviewed last month we reviewed a development, like a sketch plan
Mhm.
for the Price House property on Montgomery Avenue that would demolish part of the rear of the house and build a 4-story, 20-unit condominium building with parking on the ground floor of the building. And we heard from the borough zoning officer about whether the application complied with zoning. And so the minutes don't really reflect any of the conversation that we had, which was that there was a considerable amount of items in the proposal that don't meet zoning. And then there was also just concern about the building being too bulky and too close to its neighbors. So it didn't really meet what was intended for the zoning, which was to have a separation, for example, between building and the lower zoning district that is contiguous to the property. So I wouldn't know that we discussed any of that from the minutes. So some of the members that aren't here vote to say that if they were here, they would vote no, or they would not approve the minutes. They would like them to be revised to reflect the feedback that was given to, on this particular development. If anyone wants to move it forward tonight, we can discuss that motion or vote on the motion. Otherwise, we can recommend to staff that we revise the minutes to reflect the sort of feedback that the council and staff gave to the applicant at the last meeting.
I'm happy to work with you to provide the input from the minutes.
And that's fine, and you can always approve as amended as well, so then we can still post them before.
Well, I think we should wait to see what they say before we approve them. But, I mean, I get it. Like, there's nothing. Yeah, because I think the intent is that we would want the public to have a sense of what the discussion was. Obviously, they can watch the tape for an hour. All right. Well, let's move on then to item number 3, which is the review of the zoning amendment that council has advertised. That was emailed to you in your packets. And so I guess I'll basically provide a summary. There's a cover letter from staff on this topic. Essentially, the zoning code would be amended to do the following. It adds fitness studios and indoor recreation uses to the code as a permitted use in the 5B Montgomery Avenue zoning district. Fitness studios would be permitted in 5A downtown district with distance spacing standards and performance standards and noise regulations. It also adds noise regulations to Chapter 366 for specific uses such as fitness studios and indoor recreation. It allows general studio uses on the ground floors of buildings on Haverford Avenue within the 5A downtown district. So general studio uses. And it equalizes the parking requirement for restaurants and retail such that each use requires the same parking ratio of 1 parking space for every 400 square feet. I think so that the sections being amended are section 500.201, which is definitions. So you can review those. Section 500.401, which is the use groups. so that fitness studio and indoor recreation will be within the retail and light industry use group. Section 500-308, the 5A downtown district will be amended to permit fitness studio uses as follows. They are permitted subject to the distance standards outlined in section 500-407B3. Performance standards in section 500-408K, and that they are permitted on the ground floor of the building with a frontage on Hafford Avenue. In the table 500-308-025A, uses allowed in building types shall be amended to permit the fitness studio uses as of right within the commercial building and mixed use buildings. And by condition within apartment buildings and mixed use buildings.
You could make that.
Same thing for Montgomery Avenue, fitness studios and indoor recreation will be permitted as of right, and they will be permitted within commercial buildings and mixed use buildings. Section 500-407, fitness studios, the primary entryway to a portion of the building fronting Hafford Avenue or North Narberth Avenue containing a fitness studio use shall be located at least 350 feet from the entryway of any other portion of the building used or occupied for the same type of fitness studio use located within the 5A district. Essentially, that limits the potential number of businesses to approximately one per block, and possibly less. So there couldn't be more than one such business within 350 feet on Haverford and Narberth Avenue. Section 500-408 would be amended to provide for a new subsection K as follows. Fitness studios, the maximum width of the fitness studio located on Haverford Avenue and North Narberth Avenue, with the exception of one station circle, shall be 40 feet in width for a commercial building and 65 feet in width for a mixed-use building. Paragraph 2, fitness studios located on Haverford Avenue and North Narberth Avenue, with the exception of one station circle, with a width greater than 40 feet, shall have an independent set of doors for every additional 20 feet of facade width, one of which shall be shut within each 20-foot bay of the building. So, in other words, a building up to 40 feet wide has to have one entrance door. A building between 40 and 60 feet wide would have to have two entrance doors, and a building more than 60 feet wide must have 3 entrance doors. Paragraph 3, fitness studios may be permitted on the ground floor of commercial and mixed-use buildings on Haverford Avenue and North Narberth Avenue, except the first 12 feet of depth from the front of the building, which must be occupied by another use that is currently permitted on the ground floor of the buildings of those streets. The frontage use may be a separate distance from the fitness studio or a component of the fitness studio that conforms to the permitted uses, which is what we discussed last time that we discussed this, which was to try to preserve the retail and restaurant character of the street by having those types of existing permitted uses facing the street. Right, so section 500A-13, comprehensive allowable uses table shall be amended to show fitness studio and indoor recreation as allowable uses in the 5A and 5B districts. They're as of right, subject to distance and performance standards in 5A. Table 500A-1302, allowable uses by building type shall be amended to show that fitness studio uses are permitted in the 5A district as of right within the commercial building and mixed-use building types, by conditional use within apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings. And they're also permitted in the 5B district as of right within the commercial building and mixed-use building types. And finally, the chapter 366 nuisances shall be amended to provide for a new subsection 366-3D as follows. D, noise control. 1, objectionable noises due to intermittence, beat frequency, or shrillness shall be muffled so as not to become a nuisance to adjacent uses. 2, at no point on the lot boundary of use shall the sound pressure level of any operation exceed the described levels in the designated octave bands shown below, except for alarm systems designed to protect persons or property. And then there is a table that essentially has the band and the decibel levels permitted between 7:30 a.m. and 8 p.m., between 8 p.m. and 7:30 a.m., which is overnight. When you have a boundary with a residential district. And they will, as we discussed, they'll allow studio uses on the ground floor of the building with frontage on Haverford Avenue in 5A downtown zoning district. Yeah, then the parking is going to be amended as we discussed. So with that, that is the summary of the ordinance. Now, it wasn't clear to me, there was previous communication from the borough that there were two versions being considered, one with the 12-foot, requiring a currently listed use within the first 12 feet of the building along Haverford Avenue and North Norfolk Avenue, and another version that would not have that requirement. But we only have in our packet the one version. So.
Yeah, I provided both, but I think
You just did the Warren Highland
Yeah,
section, so
exactly.
if you want to recommend, you'll just specify whether or not that section should be included in your recommendation.
Okay, so borough council is debating whether to include that provision or not, essentially. So, because of the burden it places upon the business type to subdivide the property that way. All right, so general discussion on this topic.
I mean, certainly, I think through other discussions, the planning commission would like to recommend that aspect where we maintain that 12-foot zone of, to call it retail, to keep Haverford Avenue as lively as possible and sort of conforming to the intent we had up till now with how Haverford Avenue is occupied.
Okay, so Ralph would like to maintain the proposal as it's currently drafted. 12-foot distance. Jennifer?
I guess I have a question about the parking. Is there any concern about a reduction from 500 square feet to 400 square feet and how it will impact retail as opposed to fitness? So right now the parking is 1 per 500 square feet per retail on light industry, and it's stating that it would be reduced.
What is your...
Well, I guess, why?
the reason behind it, I think, from council's perspective, is because for restaurants and small restaurants, you allow, the code currently allows 1 space per 400 square feet, so just to even that out.
I guess I just wasn't sure. There's a concern.
I don't think it was our intention to make it more restrictive.
No.
I think it was our intention to leasing
Okay,
whichever one was lower and bring it up to the higher level. So whichever one was at 400, I think the idea was to bring it to 5.
okay,
It's the other way.
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great catch then, yeah. All right,
Does anyone on planning commission disagree with that?
No.
I think the consensus of the
Question gravel.
planning commission would be to equalize it on the more liberal standard, which is every 500 feet. Square feet. Just as a note, of course, you're exempt for the first 1,500 square feet or whatever the number is. I actually think, personally, I would do away with the requirement. I don't see how small, how properties are supposed. We're not recording until now.
Oh, we were recording, but then the internet died, so our Zoom crashed. So now we're recording again.
Okay.
It was probably.
Aaron, what do you think about the, whether the 12 feet should be required in the zoning?
Yeah, it's just the entrance of the building, right? So it's not the square footage that fronts.
I think it implies it's 12 feet back from the front facade, from the front facade, yeah, so the front thing out.
So if you had, I don't know, 2,000 square foot studio, right, which is half the size of what we've got, that's 4 parking spaces. And that full frontage needs to be all 12 feet going across to be retail.
Well, the parking, and I might get this wrong, so correct me if I get this wrong, but hypothetically for 2,000 square feet, the first 1,500 feet are exempt, I think.
Oh, they are? Okay.
That leaves 500 feet and you get a credit for the street parking on your block. So if your building is at least 20 feet wide, you probably get whatever the math works out to, you probably get that last space. I think it's only for really larger and larger projects would have a problem for parking. But then if the first 12 feet back from the front facade is supposed to be a use that is not a studio use.
Yeah, I like the spirit of looking at retail and restaurant use on Hereford, but I worry you're ultimately trying to build a studio or a gym or something that the entire frontage has to be retail.
I mean, to the extent that it could be a portion of the frontage that you would naturally have anyway for a business, because you have to check people in. You may be wanting to sell some merch for the site, which would be normal, I think. Right, so we're not asking anything that would be out of the ordinary. But if you have particularly wide frontage,
Right.
that might be a very odd proportion. So maybe we could base it on a minimum amount of or a percentage of the frontage, something like that, or frontages beyond this width would not be required, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I like that approach, or having the ability to have a waiver. If you get a long horizontal,
Right,
Shallow.
that would not make a lot of sense. I agree.
everything that makes a lot of sense. So that's where my head's at. I do like the idea of trying to keep some frontage retail. Grab and go to a restaurant. So.
Well, okay. I know, but for the people that aren't here too, I know we received, Todd's not here, he's in support of keeping the 12-foot buffer, retail or food service. And I think Brian more or less also supports that. I am a little, for me, I'm a little concerned about it's unwieldy, but because you're sort of potentially asking for 2 businesses in the space, or if it were a really small studio of some kind, you have to, if it was a sole proprietor type of situation, or let's say it's a space that's holding a class, but you only have 1 instructor, then they would have to sell merchandise and give the class. So I think it matters how big the project is. If it's a really large gym or something, then it takes over a lot of street that, that it has a larger presence. But it could just as easily be just one little small storefront in terms of the business. In which case there wouldn't be much space left in the shop if you took the first portion of it for retail.
So I think that's exactly what we're trying to prevent. So if we look at, for instance, the Pilates studio, which is around the corner, it's a small space. It's often dark, often doesn't have activity, which is fine. It's permitted as it is, but that's what we don't want to see on ever. Like a dark space that's not used all the time.
That studio does also run as an art gallery, so you
From time to
can
time, yeah.
go in and purchase all the artwork on the walls. just kind of a unique work.
No, I think it's a great
Well, but I
business.
guess the question would be like, you know, the business is, you can walk through the entire space and it is covered in artwork for sale, and then they have the fitness stuff that's happening in the same room.
Right.
Would that count, like having 12 feet of, like if you were to pick that up and put it on Hasbrook, would
And then
that
Giraffe's Play, if it's not open, doesn't even matter, so
well, sure, but we talked about, so we can't.
they can't force it.
Yeah. I mean, does it make sense to specify that the regulation applies to something over a specific width or a specific square footage?
So, yeah, I mean, you could, but then the issue there, you can have a really long
Right.
retail, so then you
Yeah.
have to further regulate it. We don't see this, level of, standard in other places. I do worry about it being just like particularly onerous for a small business owner.
I guess I was looking at when we last had the conversation, and I don't remember where we landed on it. We had had this whole conversation about like, is there any reason that you couldn't have an entry door that leads you down a hallway into a fitness studio? Like, could you truly subdivide a deeper commercial space if you had two uses that don't need back of house?
It's a building code issue too, but
I mean, as long as you have access for egress. So the commercial tenant in the rear of the building would presumably have a rear door, and then the commercial tenant in the front would have their front door, and then
they share the front door.
they could share the hallway,
But the front one wouldn't necessarily have a back door.
but it could share the hallway to the back of the second.
If the hallway goes to.
Like if you were to have a studio, like if you were to have a hallway entrance, and then a secondary entrance off the hallway into,
So are you saying it requires a hallway through from the building from front to back?
Yeah.
To meet the egress requirements?
well, we like threw it out there as like, is there any reason? And that's when we came up with the 1st 12 feet should be, so it could be that it's two separate tenants, or it could be that it's one.
Yeah, it
and
could
then
be,
there could be,
yeah.
I mean, I guess the one concern I have is just, you would have hair salons and dry cleaners and then fitness studios, all of which end their day at an earlier time than the restaurants. Now, at the same time, all the retail shops on Hamburg currently also end their day at the same time as all of those. It seems a good reason. So I'm not really sure how the fitness studio would change that. If anything, it might activate it sooner because of morning.
Yes,
Work
in the
time.
morning and then in the evening.
Yeah.
Deactivated during the middle of the day, potentially not. It really depends on the use.
Right.
Might have a class. But I know where Todd is coming from on this, because there's a fitness studio in my neighborhood in Philadelphia, City Fitness, that has this kind of like initial, it has like a shake shop, basically. You can get like a
Juice bar.
juice bar, exactly right at the front, and it's really activating, and it's great to have. So ideally, that's the kind of tenant that you want there. So I completely understand from that perspective. But are you gonna get that tenant?
I mean, and of course Todd's not here, the commissioner's not here to probably support the requirement as written. But is there a way, like, would it make sense to only require that for spaces over a certain size or front or facades over a certain width? Like your frontage is over a certain width, so if the width of your property was more than 20 feet, then
You could do that, but then I kind of support the percentage where it doesn't have to be the full.
Where it's not 12 feet, it could then, instead of being a depth, it's a square footage.
Yeah.
So if you have a studio that's going to be more than 20 feet in width, then you need to activate X square footage of the front facade. So whether you do that linearly or, because then you could carve it out and you could have more of a square commercial space and still have a studio on the facade. Would be an approach.
So how is that phrased?
The average width of 5 commercial tenants.
The bays, probably not work.
If you had a 20-foot wide bay, it would, the phrasing, I guess, would be any commercial tenant, utilizing fitness studio as a use with a frontage greater than 20 feet, must provide at minimum 250 square feet of commercial retail along the primary frontage of the building. Just, I mean, the quick math of like 12 feet deep by 20 gets you to the 240, like it's 240.
I'm okay with not being as prescriptive as to 12 feet exactly. In other words, allow people to organize the space however they like, but we still, kind of make a provision for a certain number of square feet
Maybe it's too
that's accessible from the frontage, has to be accessible from the front and provide a certain amount of square feet. That would be a little bit less onerous, I think, than saying it has to be this depth. That might be,
Yeah, I think
allow for some creativity.
So like what is the square
it's
footage?
the frontage that we're more worried about,
Is
right,
it-
than the square footage, so it's probably a percent of the frontage.
Do you do a minimum percentage of the frontage?
Yeah.
Instead
It's
of,
over 20 feet, 90 feet.
Say more than 50%.
yeah, it could be more than 50.
And that would allow you to have, say, like an entrance and then something off to the side. You wanted to split those functions. I think makes sense.
Further discussion.
Like philosophy is about 20.
I mean, generally, I think it's advantageous for a business owner to want to think this way anyway, because they would have more hours of operation. Again, we don't really want to presume exactly how someone wants to operate, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess
It's
a
a good
small
idea.
business is
yeah.
gonna just want to do the use that they want to use, but
But if they can stay open a lot longer and actually make use of their front structure, which seems like a
creative building owner.
And there are other blocks you can open on. It's really just
Yeah.
restricting it to 2 blocks of the zone that we don't allow.
At least 50% of the frontage going to 12 feet for any use.
Like we're splitting hairs because what does it matter if it's 50% or not? But it's, I mean, it does seem like the gist of relaxing the rule would be to only have it apply to facades 20 feet or wider. So the smallest stores would be exempt. And then have it be 12 feet depth for 50% of the facade, a minimum of 50% of the facade length. For the other uses. And however, it's really, I think that, the majority of the planning commissioners, some of whom aren't here, right, are supportive of this requirement essentially to try to maintain the critical mass of retail on the street. Retail and restaurant, right, so that it's mutually supportive businesses in terms of foot traffic. With the understanding, of course, like you said, that this may not be a very common regulatory approach, so it's not. And again, most towns are a little bigger.
Yeah.
That's true, that is
The
true.
niche nature of Marlboro is that
Marlboro
we
is-
do
is a
need to be
unique
more
place.
creative and I'm going to guess that most fitness uses are going to lease from properties that are greater than 1 feet.
Well, the other, I mean, to just be clear on what this actually does and does not do, if you take one of the smallest stores and you put a yoga studio in it or any kind of fitness studio, or you've taken the block and like the larger property can't then be used as a gym, right? That's what the effect of this is.
Yeah.
And it's not clear to me, just as a technical matter, right, we talked about this, like, are all fitness uses are the same, right? So
No, so it means a specific class of fitness use.
explain,
So that means, Pilates, you have to be 350 feet from another Pilates studio.
but you could be next to a Taekwondo studio.
Yes, as it's currently written, change that.
Okay. So it just can't be 3 Pilates studios in a row.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
How is that going to be, the borough zoning, like, how's that gonna be?
If forested, likely it's not. I
Kevin
mean, they,
was on the call.
oh, is Kevin on the call?
Yeah,
So we'd
yeah.
like to hear Kevin's feedback on this.
Yeah.
How is it currently enforced?
So right now they're all considered personal care. So nothing new has come in since the distance regulation was adopted. I guess what was that, about 2 years ago? So nothing has been allowed or permitted of any use type, basically along all those streets because of the existing establishments that are there on North Essex and Forest. I think there's the hot yoga on the second floor, and North Essex has the DEA studio, the yoga studio. So basically nothing is permitted now unless we change the ordinance. So sorry, I was kind of taking some notes on the 12-foot depth requirement. I don't want to get back to that quite yet. I'm kind of jotting down some notes for enforcement myself and general questions if I can get to them at the end before we move on. But that's kind of the enforcement end of it right now. The only question I have related to like these mixture of uses here is the idea that they're going to be 2 separate owner uses. Like, would the retail be run by one person or one business and the physical fitness be another person, or would that be a joint entity?
It could be either, it could be 2 owners, or it could be 1 owner, single owner.
My concern with the multiple owners is kind of what qualifies as being the retailer. Are they going to have a separate wall partition? Are they going to have a service counter that kind of physically divides that so I can do some calculations on where that, measurement needs to be taken? Are they going to move fixtures around? That kind of gets hard for me from an enforcement standpoint, as businesses kind of renovate and just move within their spaces.
That's a good point. We didn't put that in there. We didn't put that.
Another thing is when it comes to Philadelphia did this with mixed use. I think it was like RMX5, if I remember the zoning district. They required a minimum depth of 10 feet, and then they found out that for the similar type of necessity for the use, the retail use, and then they realized that this retail establishment wanted to put an accessible bathroom in there. The requirements for meeting clearances and ADA requirements were in excess of that 10 feet, and therefore a bathroom wasn't even permitted to fit in that by code, and they had to kind of get rid of that requirement. So I don't know. I feel like if it's separately owned space, you're not going to be able to put a bathroom in there because you're going to take up a majority of that space as is. And I just think from an enforcement standpoint, it's very difficult if they're 2 different establishments. Like Adam Chance was saying, if it's the same owner and you have a juice bar in the front, you're kind of just walking by that to get the equipment. I think that's a better model. But I think if it's a completely different entity of retail, that's going to be really tough for me.
So if it's one business owner and it's this juice bar element, which is to say it's a portion of the overall business that would meet the current use, sort of have two uses, if you will. Is that enforceable, and if so, how?
Well, it's one of those things where like you have to see, you don't know what you're actually going to get in front of you on an application. I think that would be enforceable right now. In the ideal sense of that, the juice bar. I mean, you probably have a sales and service counter, and they're probably going to delineate on the plans what they are identifying as the quote unquote retail space. And then when it comes to, okay, the retail is going slower, we need more equipment, and it moves in reality, or they add another piece of equipment or vice versa, that's like almost impossible for me to stay on top of unless somebody is like voluntarily telling me about it.
So if they abandon the retail, that's not something we're going to realistically be able to enforce them.
Yeah, probably not.
So what are we saying here? Are there any other changes to the ordinance? Is everything else?
Also bear in mind that for council, we're adding ranked general studios as permitted on.
Yeah, why don't you describe what is the definition of a general studio?
A general studio, that's a great point, is an establishment in which fine art or crafts are manufactured and sold to customers, or fine arts training classes are held.
But there are no spacing standards for those, right?
There are no spacing standards.
And there's no retail requirement for those,
There's no retail requirement for those, so. Yeah, I wouldn't want, again, I'm not a solicitor, but to regulate that use in a much more relaxed way than a fitness use, I wouldn't.
But it does say
Recommend that.
manufactured and sold to customers. But it does not specify that it needs to be open to the public.
It does not. And it says four fine arts training classes are held, so.
Which I think that like classes is a different, I mean, that's
It is,
still an
that's kind of like a
activation of
fitness.
the, yeah,
Yeah, but the classes aren't required either.
yeah.
Are they allowed to play music?
No, so what we did with the noise, initially I was going to apply it, just a great point as to why are we just applying that should be applied.
It's really just a noise ordinance.
So we just created a noise ordinance
Yeah,
instead.
Just making sure.
Exactly.
Okay. So the general studio use is pretty liberal, like.
Yes.
I also just kind of wanted to touch base on Adam's comment. I think it was Adam that mentioned it too. Regarding parking, the requirement for the exception for retail and light industry is 2,500 square feet, the first being exempt from parking. So we're probably not even going to see a space that hits that threshold. In other words, we're probably not even going to be requiring additional parking spaces between that exception and the on-street parking. You're probably looking at 3,000 square feet. That's a pretty big space in terms of available, lots that we have right now.
Yeah, I suppose it would apply to upstairs offices or whatever, but if you wanted to put offices on more than one floor. But Kevin, just real quick, did you say can you open a Pilates studio next to a Taekwondo studio?
Currently, right now, no. According to this ordinance, you wouldn't be able to. Right now, basically, personal service covers basically all fitness uses. They're included under one, and there's actually additional uses that are completely separate in reality that are included under that, which is why this came about, I think, from Jay, the resident originally.
Yeah. But under the proposed ordinance that council's drafted, is it still the case that we're lumping together? Like you're saying, basically, if the uses are in the same label, then you only can have one of them with that label within 350 feet of another.
Right. Yeah, that's correct under this new ordinance.
So fitness studios use that provides commercial indoor spaces for patrons or members of the public to engage in health and wellness activities, including but not limited to classes for dance, martial arts, Pilates, strength training, and yoga. Such facility may also include food and beverage and/or retail sales of related sports, health, or fitness items. So any fitness use, we only can have one in 350 feet. And does that 350 feet apply to a business that's around the corner on an unregulated street? Or does it only apply to businesses on the regulated block basis?
It's a good question. I think we've only regulated them from like within the 5A district. So basically from North Essex to North Narberth. Basically
Like, if I had a fitness studio in Station Circle,
right.
there's no spacing standard there.
Yeah, we haven't used that as one of the points to reference now.
So I can still open one on the next, like on the block of Haverford between Narberth and Station Circle.
Seems like it, yeah.
Just, so it's only within 350 feet on the regulated block facing.
I believe so, yeah, that's how we've been doing it.
So can one open another fitness studio today on Haverford Avenue? Is there already one within 350 feet
Not on Haverford.
and Narberth? Like technically
There's
also, is the spacing only for the ground floor of the use? Or because there's a yoga studio on the second floor of Narberth?
I think the spacing is for, because it says the primary entryway to a portion.
Right.
So that would encompass uses on the second floor as well.
So then you can't open any fitness use within 350 feet of the yoga barn. Is that right?
Yeah, so the yoga studio on the second floor of North Narberth, 350 feet from there, and then you have PEA and the Pilates studio on North Essex. Fitness studios couldn't be within 350 feet of that, and I don't know if that kind of overlaps the entirety of Haverford from both sides. I'm not sure. I haven't really done that exercise.
Wait, I'm sorry, is North Essex regulated? I thought North Essex, so North Essex would not trigger a spacing requirement, right? But the Pilates studio on Essex doesn't matter for spacing. Only a studio use on Haverford Avenue.
Or North Narberth is the way I read it, but again, sounds like it's.
But so then for North Narberth, like, you'd have to be 350 feet away from an existing business.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be permitted.
But there aren't any on. There aren't any. Two on Essex, but they don't count. There's one on Haverford, and then there's one on North Narberth.
So like, to put the 350 feet in perspective, it's the American Family Market space is more than 350 feet from the yoga garden. But the Get Cafe space,
Yeah.
so you could not open another studio in the Get Cafe building, but you could in the American Family building. I'm just making sure we understand how this operates. Okay.
So the thing that's a little confusing, getting your point, Adam, is under 500-407-3, the fitness studio explanation A, it says you can't be 350 feet from the entranceway for use occupied for the same type of fitness studio use. It's almost like you're trying to identify sub-uses.
Yeah, I was trying to be clear that it would be for a specific type of fitness use, because that's the way the language is for the personal hair. So I was trying to be consistent.
Right, so in other words, dry cleaners and hair salons are not the same business type
No,
from spacing perspective.
no.
So gymnasiums and yoga studios are not the same fitness type, or, fitness studio. Because they're different programs. Does that sound right?
That was the intent, yes.
That's the intent, but how is it, so, but the zoning officer was
Yeah.
originally saying that they were the same thing, so.
It's almost like you're trying to create sub-uses within a general use type. So like, as it exists as personal service now, that's like a whole bunch of things, including fitness uses, including barbershops and beauty salons, all of that. They're all kind of considered that generic title. And then you have a beauty salon, that's almost like a sub-use, right? So that's the same thing with these fitness studios. Do we want to call like a yoga studio, different than a Pilates studio is different than a gym, different than all these things. So if we want to do it that way, that's fine. And just use the definition to create those sub-uses. We can do that. So I can basically say martial arts, Pilates, strength training, yoga. Those are dance. Those are kind of the sub-uses. And that's what I'll identify like on a zoning use permit. And then it doesn't matter if martial arts is next to Pilates. I can do that.
It's that fun if somebody wants to do a yoga at Pilates studio. It's a very common overlap.
Yeah, I also feel like this regulation shall only apply to the ground floor, personally. Not the second floor, third floor.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I thought we had talked about making it 250 because that's about the width of one block on that one.
We had the discussion, but we ultimately landed in the same place as the other uses.
Yeah, I worry that people don't understand how it operates, personally. That's quite restrictive, actually. But
I agree.
So Kevin, I'm not clear. The different, just to confirm, can you open I know yoga, anything's difficult, but if you open a gym and a Pilates studio within 350 feet of each other?
So right now, when you look at your use tables, the only use listed is personal care, right? So that's what I have to call it. There's a yes or no. In that definition, it has a whole bunch of kind of sub-uses and descriptions of different types of uses and levels of activity. I have to issue what's called like a personal care permit. So because they're all being considered the same, I can't put two of those next to each other. Same thing as what I'm saying now is they're ultimately going to be identified as fitness studios, and therefore I can't put a fitness studio next to a fitness studio, even though what's happening within them are the same. It's not like yoga studio is listed as a use in the use table for yes or no. They're all just going to be kind of bumped up to that generic fitness studio standard. If we want to make it where each of these subcategories are permitted next to each other, we can do that.
But we have to change the ordinance?
Yeah, we'd have to change the ordinance. It sounds like the ordinance isn't operating currently as it's intended for personal care.
He hasn't granted any new businesses in 2 years. So I'm not sure that it's not operating as much as it, like, the moment one of these businesses closes, you can't open another one because there's too many of them.
Yeah, like I guess the point I'm making is if, let's say all at one time, the yoga studio, Kevin DA, and the hot yoga on the second floor came in at once, they would all, if they were brand new, would be getting permits for personal care. They want to be getting permits for Pilates studio. They want to get permits for strength training, all that. So they all on paper look like the same use, and therefore whoever comes in first gets it. That's how it's operating now. If that's not how we wanted to do it, we can definitely change that.
All right, commissioners, what are we?
I feel like we made this way more complicated than. I mean, to me, I feel like it was intended to be separated enough.
The only concern about me kind of vaguely putting, okay, I see that in the definition you have dance, martial arts, Pilates, strength training. Right above that, it says it's not limited to, right? So then it's like, okay, what else is allowed like that? Am I just kind of putting what I think feels like it's a fitness studio in that type? Or do you actually want to say that those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sub-uses are the only things allowed to be considered fitness studios, and then I can identify them as specific uses? That's the easiest way to enforce this.
Speaking only for myself, I come down on the side of less regulation.
Yeah.
But I know there's, and again, we have a forum, we only have 4 out of 7. I know there's a lot of concern about maintaining the character of the business district and specifically about having a diverse group of businesses that will generate mutually beneficial activity. But I think that I'm worried that the regulation could have the opposite effect of chasing all businesses away that we could get. And that it seems like a bigger problem than having too many gyms at this point. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't want to, I want to hear from the people present whether we're comfortable with this as it's written or we're recommending a change.
I mean, I think that from a general business perspective, it's unlikely that you'd have gym, just because you would think that that wouldn't be good for business, right? You just have too much of one thing, and you're just gonna, your catchment area is just gonna get cut up by too many similar businesses. So I think that almost takes care of itself. So I wouldn't necessarily regulate against type, but I still think that activating the street frontage is still something writing it in some way.
Okay, Jennifer?
The less is better, but
So you would drop the spacing requirement?
I would drop the spacing.
And
The 350 square feet.
the 350 linear feet from the nearest, because it's like the way it's being defined is in all these uses, any one of those uses is within 350 feet, you can't open.
Going back, big picture, I think we should be able to try to support small business. But I do like keeping the retail frontage if we can on larger spaces. So I go back to that point, which I think we're all kind of agreed there. On the square footage, I would probably be okay relaxing that or doing away with it to again encourage businesses, and then I think the free market would dictate on how many gyms can support or how much Harvard can support the gyms and studios, right? So to some extent, yeah, I just don't want to hinder it too much. But I think if we box it in and we have for bigger spaces enough retail there and frontage, it can still kind of keep the.
I do feel like the retail component will also play into how many people are going to pursue putting this business use on the ground floor.
Well, but if I sum up that, for the four of us present, it seems like the recommendation would be that to adopt the ordinance with the following changes to the text. One is to not employ a spacing requirement because of how it will be, how it's currently written. Any of these uses can't be within 350 feet. And so de facto, for example, we use the example of the yoga garden precludes anything within 350 feet from this list of uses. So some spaces would still be viable, but not others. The other is that we don't want to move away from, we want to continue to require the requirement for existing permitted uses, restaurants, retail, and so on, at least for facades 20 feet wide or greater. And if you're a small storefront, then you're exempt because again, it's just a very small space. So otherwise, and that we already discussed that the parking should be equalized around every 500 square feet, not 400 square feet. And I think those are our three changes and no other changes. Okay, so that is the consensus of the members present. I know there probably might have been further discussion if we had other members, but we were asked specifically to try to give our feedback in August to keep this moving. So I think we gave it a pretty thorough discussion, and that's the the sentence. So again, the planning commission endorses the ordinance with the following changes. One is to require the parking for every 500 square feet, not every 400 square feet. Two is to only require the retail and restaurant uses for the first 12 feet of depth of the building if your building is 20 feet wide or greater. And three is to drop the spacing requirements and they all together. It's certainly something that could be revisited in the future if it presents as an actual problem. And again, that's just for the fitness studio use spacing. We don't have to reopen the other one right now. It's not on the table. So that's what the members present discussed. Any further discussion of this item? All right. Well, then, if that's the case, we can go on to the topic 4, which is the stacked townhomes presentation from staff.
Okay. So I've got a couple of slides here just on stacked townhomes. This is a housing typology that is becoming more and more popular. And there's definitely endorse stacked townhomes. So basically, they consist of 2 or more dwelling units arranged vertically in a townhouse-style building with separate entrances. That really is what distinguishes the stacked townhouse from a different type of. So you have 2 households within the stacked townhouse, one in the upper units, one in the lower unit. It could be 2 units, it could be more than 2 units. I mean, it depends on the height of the building and how you regulate it. So this is considered kind of missing middle housing. So just one of the most popular kind of images of missing middle housing is up on the screen. You have your detached single family houses, very popular. Then you've got, in recent years, a lot of apartments, mid-rise apartments have been built, but kind of what's missing is the in-between styles. So that's townhouses, that's stacked townhouses, cottage courts. We've discussed many of them here. So this type of housing kind of like fits into that typology, fits into that group. And they can be developed as for sale units, condominiums, rental units. The zoning code is not going to regulate that portion. But most typically, they're developed as condos where the individual units are owned separately, while the structure and the common areas are owned collectively. Go to the next slide. What are the benefits? So, expanding the housing supply, providing that missing middle housing option, and that tends to be more suitable for a first-time home buyer or a resident looking to age in place. They tend to be a little bit smaller than your typical townhome or detached house. And because they're a little bit smaller, and also, more units can be accommodated on the same amount of land, they tend to be a little bit less expensive, so a little bit more affordable with the housing of the region. And as has been expressed in our group, there's some concern around existing neighborhoods with dense types of housing. Stacked townhomes can be built so that they kind of fit in to existing neighborhoods of all different kinds. They're often used as a transition type of housing between a downtown area and single-family detached homes. So if they can fit, in a place such as the 4A district, they could also potentially fit certain parts of Montgomery Avenue as well. I think Montgomery Avenue can accommodate denser housing in that too. And they can be built at a scale that's kind of compatible with the existing residential neighborhood. So the types of stacked townhomes that I've seen, sometimes they'll have architectural features that remind you of a house. Sometimes they have bay windows, or they'll have different types of architectural things that you commonly see in houses. You can go to the next slide. So I looked into examples and I kind of tried to get some feedback from some of my colleagues, and they haven't been built too much in Montgomery County, though they're starting to be a little bit, but I don't know how, because they're not regulated. So in Lansdale, they are permitted, in Upper Providence, there are a couple others where it could probably be fit into the zoning code. But these are just a couple of examples that I found. So in Skippack Township, on the lower left-hand side, those are some stacked townhomes, so they have entrances in the front and then on the sides to the building and the different units that are stacked on top of one another. And then I also noticed more recently, and with less kind of architectural features, so much more basic, in Bridgeport Borough, there's a huge new development of about 350 units, and about 50 of the units came in as stacked townhouses. So that's brand new, kind of hot off the press. Seems like there is demand for this type of housing in Montgomery County and elsewhere. So I imagine they're going to become more and more popular, but we're just kind of seeing the beginning of them starting to be built and people starting to talk about adding them into zoning codes as specific types or regulating them under an existing typology. So for Narberth, I guess the discussion is, is this something that we think would fit here? And where, and then obviously there'll be a lot of kind of regulations around them if they were to be. That's all I really have. I'm still trying to get more information from colleagues and things like that. It's an ongoing discussion kind of in our office about how do we encourage more of them. Yeah.
I guess we do a lot at work.
Oh, great, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of them in like Harrisburg, Lancaster,
Okay.
like Central PA. I'm
Sure.
happy to share like some plans and like renderings and photos that we have from completed projects.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Um,
Because I really just saw kind of like Bridgeport Borough,
Yeah.
Lennar.
Yeah,
you know.
I haven't done them
Yeah.
locally, but we've done them across the state. What's interesting about all the ones that we've done is that we've done them as 3 stories.
Yes.
So you have a mix of 2-story units and 1-story units. Because frequently when they get built as a large cluster, then you have to comply with the ADA guidelines for 88 units. But also we've done them like split level. So it's 3 stories, but each apartment gets 2 stories. So one unit will get ground floor front facing, second floor front facing, and then the rear gets, a smaller portion on the bottom and a larger portion on top. Sort of like an upside down unit. We've been doing them for years.
Right, yeah.
And honestly, they just look like townhomes with extra doors.
Yeah, they really do, they really do.
Like
Especially when they're 3 stories, yeah, then you wouldn't even know that
Yeah.
they have 2 units stacked on top of one another.
Yeah. But yeah, we've done a lot of times with like one ground floor unit and then stairs, and then the upper level is 2 units, like 2 stories of a larger unit type. But yeah, but it's been a more common practice in the middle of the state. I think the first one that I can think of that I know that I worked on was 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, I have seen a couple in the city from like 10, 15 years ago, but yeah.
To me, they would look like the townhomes that you go past on Haverford, right up by Montgomery.
Yes.
It would
yes.
look like that typology.
Those reminded me
Yeah.
of them, yeah.
So I guess I'm in full support of adding to our roll the density housing typology.
Yeah.
I do think that it's an interesting concept in the 4A and also 5.
5B as well, yeah. I don't think they make sense probably in other places.
Come on.
No, but I don't
This
see
is
why
like-
you would.
it's, just respectfully, right? The interesting thing about Narberth is it's not a single family zoned. It's not a single family community. There are entire blocks. I live on the south side,
Yes.
especially on the south side, where there's nothing but like houses, right? But even though some of those houses, in some cases, have been subdivided into apartments.
True.
But they're houses, right? But even on the south side, we have apartment buildings that don't comply with zoning because it's zoned single family or whatever, right? And on the north side, there's just tons of apartment buildings and interesting things going on. So it's the architecturally, I think that the church redevelopment includes some kind of multifamily condos as part of it, and I think it's a handsome building, right? I think it totally matches the neighborhood. It really enhances the neighborhood. It's compatible with the older historic structures, and it's one of the better types of that. So it's not in 4A, right? Like, you know.
I think it
No,
should
that's
be
true.
across
It could,
all
it could be across all the typologies. My only thought was maybe not, and it could be everywhere. I wouldn't want to get the traditional row homes and it would be kind of replaced. That was my only thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I could see them across the board, yeah.
I feel like, and maybe this is how the code is written in Harrisburg and out in like Lewisburg where I've done. I feel like I've only ever done them in larger clusters. Like when you think of townhomes, sometimes you would think of a twin or a triple, but I've only ever done these in much longer clusters of like 5 or 6 doors together, where it takes up a larger space, almost apartment building, and but still giving the undulation of entries that you would get from a row home.
Again, it was well before my time on the planning commission, but the Price Avenue townhomes development, like those are townhomes, right? But they could have been developed as stacked townhomes.
Right.
And I think, that's where I think honestly this is sort of getting at this distinction that to me the important thing about what we're discussing isn't the word townhome or stacked, right? It's that it's a form of condominium that's not apartment flats, right? Like, in other words, an apartment flat building is, flat apartments in a box, and the townhomes is, more about like the structure may be demised by actual party walls. It may have architectural features much more in common with housing types. It's like there are houses like gables and porches. It's an architectural difference, but the size of the units may be, they might be a little larger than apartments, but it isn't really about square footage. And it's not really about ownership structure because you're still essentially a condo owner. And so I think what the zoning needs to do is to not restrict how many buildings can be put on a parcel or how many dwelling units can go on a parcel, to one building per parcel, right? Because that
One primary building.
right, because these other projects were done under the old code when it was the use that was regulated. So if the use allows townhomes, well, then you could build more than one townhome on your lot. And architecturally, it doesn't really matter, right? They look like townhomes, but that allows you to have the shared driveway and the shared exterior, as an HOA, or basically as an HOA. So,
Yeah, I think, so Todd had commented just sort of like in his take, it was just doing a modification to allow for row homes to have 2 units. And to me, I think it expands beyond that. Like, I do think that that's one way of doing
I
it.
thought
Like,
that is a way of doing it, and that's how other folks do it. Yeah,
it's not sufficient to
But
2
it's
different
not-
projects she's talking about.
I agree.
Because the like a row home is sort of conceived as this like 16 to 20 foot wide parcel that's 50 to 80 feet deep, and it, I think that, in order to provide a parking lot, for example, you have to have a large piece of property, and so the idea is you want to have a shared parking lot for the homes, right, or a shared driveway for the garages, and not chop the parcel up into little tiny slivers. And then you also would have, and that larger parcel then would have like one maybe potential common landscaping treatment and so on, or not treatment, but it's a common element
Yes.
of the property. So I think that the corollary is to allow more than one building on a lot.
yeah, I guess I see it as 2 different. Like the first would be reviewing the way that we allow for the conversion of a detached or multifamily house, and review whether the typology of allowing duplexes in a row home makes sense. But then the second is the stacked townhome. I see them as 2 different things.
Well, and then a duplex and a townhome, you said separate entrances, does that mean a separate door on the street?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, a lot of times, historic townhomes that get chopped up, they have one door, and then they have interior
Yeah,
apartments,
so that would be like a duplex, yeah.
which we don't have
Which
today.
we also don't have today, so.
Does our multi-family house require multiple entrances?
It requires one entrance,
One entrance in the front and then a side entrance for,
and that's why I think the fixation is, like, we already have a multifamily house. So in a way, like, you could have a multifamily row house or townhouse, right?
you could, I mean, you could, that's,
Because I don't know why you need to have a separate front door for each unit.
you don't have to have it, it's just currently prohibited to have one front door.
Yeah, and that's in the houses, and there's some reason why that's the case, but, I think we're talking about like essentially new build. Or we don't really have large townhomes to divide, but, if you were to build a new one, maybe you want to have other doors, or maybe you don't, right? That's really a question for the architect.
I think the concept of the definition of the stacked is that you're providing a private entrance. Whereas when you start eliminating doors and having single entrances, it feels like you're developing more of an apartment style building. Yeah, arguably like doing a development of a stacked townhome and still doing that.
I think it's really just distinguishing it from typology.
You could limit like one entry for every 2 units, because otherwise there's no reason that somebody who wants to build an apartment building or a mixed-use building right now couldn't come and say, I'm building this building, it's gonna have 20 units, but I'm gonna have 10 doors. So I feel like you have to differentiate.
That's why I also personally think we ought to have a TMD overlay, really, for the whole borough, probably, but basically it's.
I did look into that a little bit, and that's similar to your point about, that's generally for larger parcel, like for.
Doesn't have to be though.
Generally, that's how it's been used to date.
It's done that, like, it's used for larger parcels to do master planned,
Yes,
Yeah.
large developments.
Yes.
Because, so that you're not bound by the Saldo and the zoning, and you can figure it out how to build a town, right, or a neighborhood, but you can use it really for any size project, and I don't know that anyone would the issue is that I don't know that people will take the risk of investing in the documentation if they don't have a by right guarantee of being able to proceed with the project for such a small project with no return. But it just, we just are tying everyone's hands in terms of they can't do certain things architecturally. They can't be creative, right, with problem solving or with architecture to produce something really nice. Because it has to follow this cookbook, so. Anyway, but is anyone against this idea? I mean. So the planning commission supports the idea of stacked townhomes. It's just a question probably of like what it will take to enable that in terms of changes to the use tables, and then really to investigate like the site planning criteria and perhaps to make changes to site planning or subdivision rules, or like basically to permit more than one townhome on a lot to make it easier to build townhomes. So if you have a large parcel, you could put 3 townhomes on it without subdividing the parcel.
yeah, I mean, the same goes for cottages. If you change that, then instead of needing a cottage or a housing type thing like this.
Many cottages will fit,
Exactly.
so.
I think it would be interesting to see the different definitions of stacked.
Yeah, I mean, I could pull one up right now, just in Montgomery County. I have a couple. Or I can read them to you. closed out though. Okay. It's basically from Moreland, from Providence, they both have different issues.
It could be something that we review further with everybody. And I'm happy to share with you sort of some of the,
Yeah, I'd love to see more, because I asked around and I was kind of crickets, surprisingly, because we talked about them.
I feel like, I've designed them or worked on projects to design them in areas where land was available, but apartment buildings weren't allowed. Or where the, general consensus from the area government or planning commission was that they would approve the project with whatever conditional uses it needed if one of the conditions was that it designed it in this way so that you maintained the character of the street facade. And that's typically when we've ended up doing it, but I'll double check. We're doing our fourth one in 2 years in Harrisburg right now, so I'll pull what the code is to see why we keep doing them there in particular, but
I think you're probably right there. I mean, what we've seen here is just more apartment buildings.
yeah.
Mixed use buildings, that's been more popular.
Right. But I
In Monaco, but we're gonna, so I think we'll get the precedents for those, what the zoning looks like, where this is happening.
Yeah.
What, if there's a difference.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just curious because I think when you Google the definition, it does specify like private entries and
Yes.
different things like that. So I'm just curious like what different jurisdictions, how they are defining it. We can talk.
Yeah, like the entries, to me, it's like, that's
Yeah.
the market,
Yeah.
right? If it's for sale units, you're gonna do what the market
Sure.
is asking for, so.
Which I think.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic. Condos are complicated too.
Condos are probably,
Yeah,
I
the
think
neighbors
that-
tell you can't plant flowers.
the individual unit where once you step through the threshold, you are then responsible for what's on the interior of the walls. Alleviates sort of some of the issues that come up in condos where, like, if you have a shared entry, then the condo association is still responsible for that shared piece. Whereas if you own it from the minute you open your door, then you're just responsible for what you own.
Yeah, look, I don't have a strong opinion on this, but I have owned condos in the past, that I lived in, and I have traveled extensively, and there are many, many condos that have shared entrances, but they're not designed as like, they're not really like apartment buildings in the what you would think of as a very common apartment typology. So they're sort of in this middle ground, right? And they often fit into very residential areas. So anyway, so that's why I think it's, if we're overly restrictive, we actually might get really more boxy cookie cutter stuff and with less residential character, because it's really an architectural problem of how to, create the project. And in the indoor-outdoor space. And then it is true that the HOA, like, they write their own bylaws, so the owners can change the standards one way or the other that apply to all of them in terms of who maintains what. So sometimes the windows are maintained as a common element, but sometimes they're not, right? And so, yeah, and landscaping and everything else, like, it's really up to the HOA to determine how that would be governed. Once it's built, so.
I will say I've typically seen it in more of an apartment model than condo.
So you'll help Adam with the zoning from the projects.
Please just pulling more to present.
Any further discussion on this topic? if there's no further discussion on item 4, we can go to item 5, which is public comment on general matters related to NPC business. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment? Any online people? There are no public comments this evening, so we can take, is there any other topic that people feel we didn't cover that we should address for August? Thank you all for coming in. I know that you might have had other plans, so I appreciate you donating your time this evening. All right, if there's no further business, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second?
So motion and second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? We are unanimous and stand adjourned. Thank you all.